In light of the recent increases in persecution of traditional Catholics by bishops in places like Charlotte or other dioceses, where out of the blue, for seeming no reason, new Latin Mass bans have gone into effect. Many Catholics have asked some uncomfortable questions, including whether is Pope Leo XIV in support of these Latin Mass bans and suppressions, or if the bishop doing this are just doing these things to get the job done before Leo XIV changes the rules governing the Latin Mass. Everyone has their own theory on this, and people are generally asking the basic question, though, of can anything be done? And they've decided to find out by taking direct action by petitioning Pope Leo XIV to unrestrict the Latin Mass directly. I've posited before that going back at least to John Paul II, we know that the lavender types in Rome had controlled the sort of internal communications and internal mechanisms of power in the Roman Curia. Many reports of people going to meet with Benedict XVI and John Paul II would meet with them face to face, ask them about the McCarrick problem in America and other pertinent issues of corruption in the hierarchy. And they'd ask them why they hadn't done anything about it. We wrote letters to you and to the bishops who answer to you, why didn't you do anything? And they get the response of, well, I never got the letter. Or my authority, as Benedict XVI famously told one priest who visited him, my authority ends at my office door, to give you an idea how bad things had gotten. But at the same time, it cannot be discounted that Francis and other popes were on board with some of these problems. I mean, after all you have to look at is to see who gave who made Jorge Mario Bergoglio a cardinal, who kept sweeping away Ted McCarrick's allegations and all sorts of other things. So people have these questions, but they're going to now attempt to petition Pope Leo XIV directly. So we go here to LifeSite News with the headline, Letter Campaign urges Pope Leo to restore Latin Mass after U.S. bishops crack down. The faithful are encouraged to implore Pope Leo XIV to consider abrogating Traditionis Custodes and restore access to the traditional Latin Mass worldwide. Now, if there is a Latin Mass restoration, I am personally of the opinion that it will not be a full restoration of Summorum Pontificum. It will be somewhere in between what we have now and what happened before. And it certainly won't be something more permissive than Traditionis, or more permissive than Summorum Pontificum. I don't think that's even a remote possibility. But I tend not to be the most optimistic kind of person when it comes to these kinds of things. But a lot of people are hoping, they've placed all their hopes and dreams on the new Pope. And as Catholics, we should, in a time of crisis, be able to place all our hopes and dreams about the state of the church and all good things about the faith on the Holy Father. For after all, he is supposed to be not only the sign of unity, he's also supposed to be the supreme pastor, supreme shepherd, and as such, rein in, or worse, the worst elements within the church. We'd love to see. Every one of us would do cartwheels tomorrow if it came out that Pope Leo had suppressed the Jesuits, or had at least silenced their most nasty public personas, like Father James Martin, F.J. Unfortunately, that's unlikely to happen as well. But let's take a look here at the details of this, and I'll give you some context of why this is happening. Quote, a letter-writing campaign has been launched to ask Pope Leo XIV to revoke the traditional Latin Mass suppressing Traditionis Custodes, thereby permitting the continuation of many TLMs around the world. Write to the Holy Father, save the TLM, sums up the call of the faithful advocate, an apostolate born within the Diocese of Charlotte, where Bishop Michael Martin's crackdown on TLM sparked a particularly impassioned outcry, echoing those following other such suppressions prompted by Pope Francis's Traditionis Custodes. The group has invited parishes and Catholics across the country to write to the Pope, asking him to abrogate Traditionis Custodes and protect the sacred liturgy worldwide. Faithful Catholic's website has provided sample letters for the faithful to submit to the Holy Father, either as is or modified, which implore him to restore the rights of communities to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass within their parish churches. I'm going to pause here. Form letters are fine, I guess, But having done political work in the past, I will tell you, if you are sending in the identical letter to something that every other, if they've seen the same letter coming into their offices 1,000 times, the exact same letter, they're going to dismiss it, or at least it will not have the same impact. Personally written letters are better. If I were you, I would take their letter and then modify it. If you're wanting to do this, make it as much your own words as possible. Keep some of it if you want. Keep it on the same message as everybody else. But a personal letter is more powerful. And frankly, if you are that impassioned to ask for the restoration of the traditional Mass, then you should at least be willing to make the letter your own. Maybe have a friend proofread it if you're not that great of a writer. I get it. But make it your own words. You can do at least that much. These don't have to be long letters. In fact, brevity is going to be your friend in this. But make it personal. Form letters are usually less helpful than advocates usually make them out to be. Back to it, though. Quote, "We respectfully ask your holiness to consider abrogating Traditionis Custodes, since suppressing the traditional Latin Mass risks alienating devoted Catholics, stifling spiritual growth within the universal church, and undermining the unity it seeks to promote. Read the letters. A sample letter for those residing in the Diocese of Charlotte and the Archdiocese of Detroit have been provided, as well as a general letter which can be used by anyone throughout the world. The TLMs of the Archdiocese of Detroit, which were also recently targeted, have taken a particularly hard hit, since the Archdiocese offered 28 locations for the traditional Latin Mass, and as of July 1st, 2025, those will be reduced to 4 locations. While the group aimed to have parishes collect letters by or before June 23rd, individual Catholics may submit letters at any time, although the faithful are encouraged to quickly voice their concerns." End quote. And there's more details there in that article if you would like to read it for yourself, and I encourage you to do so. I will have links in my show notes at returntotradition.org, and it will be, I think, to your benefit to do so. I would tell you to also that there is something going on here a little closer to home, because in the Diocese of Tulsa, there is the main diocesan TLM available in the city, which I've met personally people there at that Mass who traveled hundreds of miles to go there every Sunday. Most of their day was either driving to or home from Mass to attend that Mass, even though there were actually FSSP options closer to them. That Mass had reportedly been essentially terminated as of next week. And there is some details about that. An open letter to the bishop and to the Pope, published to the Okie Traditionalist blog. I was asked to make this heard for people, so I will do my part here. "Dear Holy Father Pope Leo and Bishop Conderla, please examine my last several blog posts reporting on the new Traditionis Custodes restriction of the ancient Mass in the Diocese of Tulsa. Please see all my appeals in the local response. What is happening here right now is happening right now all across the Latin Church to faithful Latin Mass Catholics who worship our Lord in parochial parishes." Parochial meaning your diocesan normal parishes. "We Catholics everywhere who love our Catholic tradition have every reason to feel at this moment persecuted, devastated, fear, and distrust. This Sunday, the one diocesan TLM in the city of Tulsa at Saints Peter and Paul, a very stable and active TLM community of 13 years, will be dissolved. Truthfully, there's been a lack of transparency, clear explanations, due consideration to the people, refusal to meet with the bishop, and a discouragement to rightfully question, express grievances, petition, or organize prayer events. Please come to our rescue in all dioceses right now where this suppression is happening, whether in Michigan, North Carolina, Missouri, or Oklahoma, whether in the U.S., Peru, Nigeria, or Poland, everywhere. Please contact our bishop to prevent this permanent shutdown, and all the respective bishops before it's too late. We give you our holy submission of obedience and also our grievance and last-minute plea. Please invoke your supreme authority and come to the defense of the Mass of the Saints, the Mass of the Ages, the Mass of St. Pius V, that is the ancient and venerable rite of our Church of Rome, for the greater glory of God. Sincerely, the signed Joseph Ostermeyer, which is a pen name, the man behind the Okie Traditionalist blog. Now, that story caused a bit of a firestorm when it broke, because As it turned out, a lot of people in the at that parish were not happy when the articles that I went over a couple of weeks ago about this started taking off across the internet. They were very, very unhappy about this, which to a degree I kind of understand. But they were more upset with the blog host than they were anybody else. So he's taking it directly to the bishop. And I do think that's actually probably a good thing to take it directly to him. And note that he also used, he framed things in the most positive way you can imagine. And that is not a bad thing. Now, let's give you more context here. Why are people taking this directly to the Pope? Not just the Okie traditionalists, but people all over. Because there's a rising tide of a return to tradition. If you'll forgive my turn of phrase there, you're seeing a laity-led, probably Holy Spirit-led movement. Nobody knows whether appealing to the Pope is going to work or not. People have their theories. We've said before, people are wish casting or nightmare casting, if you prefer, their hopes, dreams, or great fears onto the person of Pope Leo XIV, fueled by things he's done or things he has said. I personally don't think that these bishops, though, who are suppressing the Latin Mass, would take these actions unless they determined they had friends in Rome or that Rome was telling them to keep doing it, and we're just not hearing about it. That's my personal take on it. We shall see. But the petition is part of a larger trend. More and more parishes are reinstalling communion rails. In some parishes, the practice of communion in the hand is outright being banned. After all, it's only being allowed anyway by an indult. It's not the law of the church to allow communion in the hand, no matter what some bishop tells you. But in others, more and more priests are open to laity receiving the Eucharist either in the hand or kneeling it on the tongue. And you're also seeing some bishops in some dioceses taking great personal offense at this and trying to use their power to say no, despite the fact that Rome tells you you have the right to receive the Eucharist on the tongue if you want. And then no circumstance can you be denied for that. Of course, nobody enforces that either, but you know how it goes. This has gotten the attention of Cath.net. They're German. This is like a German and Austrian version of LifeSite, if LifeSite was a little more moderate. The headline is, a quiet new U.S. trend. Catholic parishes reintroduce communion benches. Google Translate leaves something to be desired, but this would be communion rails. But this is a reemerging of something good in the church in the U.S. A return to the traditional understanding of the due reverence we owe to the Eucharist. Because if it is truly God present in the Eucharist, we should probably be kneeling. Okay, in theory, that's the argument. I know a lot of people get very impassioned about communion in the hand, citing Tertullian and ignoring all the corrections to Tertullian that the church fathers gave him when he told people to receive in the hand, and ignoring all the accounts we have of it not being received in the hand in the first century. But be that as it may, people get very divided on this. But there's a trend returning, and that is restoration of communion rails. Here are the details. Quote, Reverend Dawid Kwiatkowski of St. Anne's Church of Richmond Hill, Georgia, told the National Catholic Register, not Reporter, that he was looking for a communion rail that would meet everyone's needs. He took into account that some people prefer communion kneeling on the tongue. Some prefer communion in the hand, and some, perhaps for health reasons, prefer communion standing. So far, he has found that about 90% of people kneel to receive communion. Even if they receive communion in the hand, they kneel and use the altar rail. Let's pause here. When you have, there's like a breaking point in a parish. When a sizable amount of people start receiving kneeling, either in the hand or on the tongue, it causes other people to do the same. That is the effect that outward displays of piety appropriately done in the right context, without making a show of yourself, can have on people. They start doing it too. Case in point. People love to get on the case of new arrivals to the Latin Mass. People do not understand sometimes that person you see coming in jeans and a t-shirt to your Latin Mass, it's their first time coming to a traditional Latin Mass. They're probably very nervous to be there. And it didn't occur to them that people at a traditional Mass tend to dress up on average a little bit better than they do at a Novus Ordo I know, and I'm not trying to attack people who go to the ordinary form. But people will come into a traditional mass for the first time, not dressed in as modestly as people expect. We call this the veil police. Usually this means going after women, right? Because they're not putting on a veil. And some people are like, oh, you can't go into the sanctuary without a veil. Don't be that person. You scare that person away. That person will come to mass and they will see how other people are behaving, and they will subconsciously or consciously improve. I've seen it 100 times. The same effect is here. Communion rails, people receiving kneeling, people will start improving the way they do things just because they see others doing it. It's human nature. Back to it. He says, those who cannot kneel for health reasons, for example, naturally stand anyway. Liturgical aesthetics played a role in the renovation. We wanted to make sure that the communion rail essentially looks like it has always been there. The result, more people came, says Reverend Kwiatkowski. When he took over the parish in 2022, he met younger families who desired a more reverent reception of the Holy Eucharist. This development had already begun under the previous pastor, who had begun emphasizing reverence for the Eucharist in 2010. Initially, after a few years, a small portable kneeler was introduced as an optional part of receiving communion, which was well received. The article describes the reactions of various parishioners, including parents, adolescent children, and altar servers, and makes it clear that everyone appreciates having more time to receive communion, developing a greater sense of reverence, and focusing exclusively on Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament rather than on the minister of communion. And it goes on to talk about, the laws governing these things and that kind of thing. But the effect is there. And this is happening in lots and lots of parishes across the United States and beyond. But not every bishop or high-ranking official in the church is happy about this. See, an abbot in Charlotte had some harsh things to say to the Catholics who want the old mass, and he objected very strenuously to people's reaction to what the bishop did. You'll remember a couple of months ago, maybe actually it was not even a couple of months ago, in the aftermath of the passing away of Pope Francis, guess what happened? Bishop of Charlotte started implementing Traditionis Custodes. His reasoning that the extensions that the diocese had gotten under the previous bishop were about to expire, so he was just implementing things. And he seemed to be going at breakneck pace to do it. And not only to ban the traditional mass, that was like the tip of the iceberg. He was also telling people to stop kneeling to receive the Eucharist, do not install altar rails, cracking down on veiling. I mean, he wanted to go after reverence in the mass itself. This caused a huge firestorm that caused him to delay his implementations. Reportedly, he had been told to not go so quickly in the implementation of his plans for the liturgy and for liturgical behavior. And he'd been told that by the prefect for the dicastery of the bishops last year. That prefect is now the Pope. So we'll let you ruminate on the meaning of that all you like. But here we go to LifeSite for the headline. Abbot defends Charlotte bishop, calls leaks a work of death. Abbot Placid Solari of Belmont Abbey College blasted Catholic media and other critics of Bishop Michael Martin for pushing back against his attacks on reverent liturgy. Yeah, it's a work of death to be against the traditions of the church being swept away as if they're an inconvenience and as if there was some other religious practice brought into the faith. Amazing stuff. And now he's, of course, the subject of pushback himself, because that's how it works. Abbot Placid Solari, Chancellor of Belmont Abbey College and abbot of its adjoining monastery, waded into the Diocese of Charlotte's mounting liturgical controversy in his Pentecost Sunday sermon. Solari defended Bishop Michael Martin and slammed recent leaks of internal policy documents as works of death, fomenting disunity, perverting truth, and utterly lacking in charity. It's not clear which truth he saw as being twisted. He took issue with the anonymous nature of the leaks, calling on the congregation to shun the works of darkness and anonymity. This has gravely damaged trust, he said, claiming that the resulting media frenzy had gravely injured the peace and unity of this local church. He accused Catholic media reporting on the planned elimination of visible signs of piety of being church-related political action communities, stirring division with jargon, hyperbole, and nearly apocalyptic urgency. Praising Bishop Martin's consultation process, Solari contrasted it with what he described as a toxic secular political model, now in fact infecting the church, a power struggle of competing factions, hyper-individualism, and relativism. Let's just pause there. Accusing those who want reverence of the Mass of relativism is rich. That's really rich, coming from those who want to make the Mass as irreverent as seemingly possible, short of bringing in the local clowns from the local circus. Again, that's an amazing thing for him to say. But he's very upset, thinks that the bishop should have just been obeyed on his radical forms or changes to the Mass that he wanted to make that were so radical that even the prefect for the dicastery of the bishops who served under Pope Francis told him, hey man, slow down. You're doing way too much, way too fast. Work of darkness. Calling the leaks crude and clumsy plays for power and control, Solari insisted that Bishop Martin, whose liturgical crackdown had sought to remove altar rails, kneeling for Holy Communion, traditional vestments, and ad orientem worship, had unfairly been labeled authoritarian. According to Solari, the real problems facing the Church and the Diocese of Charlotte are a lack of proper obedience and respect for legitimate authority, moving people to feel free to pick and choose what teachings they choose to accept, what authority they regard as legitimate. He's right that there is that big problem in the Church. I mean, have you seen how many people reject the Church's teaching on contraception, for example, or the Church's teaching on saving certain activities suited to the married state for the married state instead of doing them outside of that? Or, I don't know, even at the most basic level, like usury and other things. I mean, people pick and choose their teachings of the Church that they want to follow or not, aided and abetted in it by their bishops, by Rome, who does not allow, in many cases, their priests to preach the truth on these things and to deny people these things, to deny people the sacraments until they reform themselves. After all, what happens when a high-profile politician who supports the sacrifice to Moloch of either the most young or the most old proudly calls themselves Catholic while voting to support those things and enacting those things, and then goes and marches up to receive communion? What happens? The laity see that and they follow suit. So please, Abbot, spare us this relativism argument you're making. Now, some of you may have heard about this. This happened a little while ago, but in the aftermath of all this, Bishop Martin invited one of the most notorious Catholic YouTubers in America to his diocese to speak. Back to the article, quote, "Meanwhile, Bishop Martin has invited Father Casey Cole, OFM, a priest and social media figure, to move to the diocese with two other friars. Cole, who almost never prays the rosary and has made clear that he will never say the traditional Mass, has been widely criticized by faithful Catholics for his views on divorce, sacramental confession, and the James Martin inclinations. Solari described one of the two leaked documents as an anonymous letter last fall, presumably to give Bishop Martin instructions as to how to exercise his office as bishop. It's not clear whether this is a reference to the first document leaked in May, but Solari's description is difficult to reconcile with what appears to be guidelines for priests in dealing with Catholics unhappy with suppression of the TLM in the Charlotte Diocese. Solari himself has led Belmont Abbey since 1999 and plays a direct role in formation. He describes Belmont Abbey College as a place where students seek the truth in all aspects of life, grounded in the Benedictine spirit of hospitality, stability, and mutual charity. And mutual charity need not apply to those who want the traditional sacraments and voice their opposition to radical changes being imposed on the faith. Now, the question, of course, that some people always have with this is, what is it we're fighting for? Why are we fighting for whatever it is we're fighting for? And there are a lot of different answers. At the most basic level, we're fighting against a revolution. There was a revolution in the Church. Now, some of us say the revolution was completed at Vatican II and everything else afterwards was the mop-up operation. Others say it wasn't Vatican II, but its implementation. And it really doesn't matter what the right answer is for the typical layperson. Yes, there is a correct answer, and God willing, we'll get a pope who will appoint bishops who will zero in on the correct answer and do what needs to be done to rectify the situation. But for the rest of us, this is an argument that we have. But this is all about the revolution in the church itself at its core level. And Dr. Anthony Esolen posted, I think, something very useful to X that I wanted to really share with people, because at the end of the day, this is what we fight. This is why we are fighting against the things that we do, and why bishops like Bishop Martin and Abbot Solari need to really take stock in everything going on. For those who don't know, Dr. Anthony Esolen, he's author, he's the writer or translator of 30 books on culture, language, poetry, and Christian faith. He's well known for a translation of the Divine Comedy by Dante, considered one of the best, like, sort of modern translations. You want to read, the Inferno, the Purgatory, and the Paradise in more contemporary English. Dr. Anthony Esolen's is the one you probably want to go look for. Here's what he had to say. The underlying message that Catholics received from Vatican II was that the Church had changed with the times, and that much of her heritage was old and musty and no longer of any use. Also, that much of what she had taken for granted as true was not so. I'm not here speaking of the actual documents of the Council, which very few Catholics read, or the writings of Paul VI, but of what filtered down to the parishioners, at the very time when all previous understandings of the world were thrown open to question, in often shallow and irresponsible ways. So then, this is how Joe Catholic tended to think of things, because everything around him, from his own decaying culture to the priest at the pulpit, from Star Trek to MASH, said that old ways were dead and old moral understandings were dusty and useless. Why don't we fast from midnight if we're going to receive communion? Vatican II. Why isn't it necessarily wrong if a college boy and his girl sleep together? Vatican II. Why did they get rid of the statues of saints in the parish church? Vatican II. Why isn't it so bad, after all, if Mr. and Mrs. O'Boyle get a divorce, since they can't stand each other? Vatican II. Why do we have guitars at Mass? Vatican II. Why don't we say this prayer and that prayer and the other prayer anymore? Vatican II. Why does the religion teacher in high school do values clarification instead of theology or catechesis? Vatican II. Why is the pill all right, even if the Pope said it wasn't? Vatican II. Now let's pause there. The Council didn't say anything about any of those things. But people always say Vatican II changed it. This wasn't to blame Vatican II. It was just a feature of the mental and attitudinal world. Old ways were gone, and new ways were on the move. And eventually, even the Pope or some other Pope of the future, here I think of Jackie Gleason sputtering, homina, homina, I'm the Pope of the future, will come around. But even if he didn't, what would it matter? And he's not wrong. This is what we fight for, or more likely what we fight against. There was a revolution in the church. We could disagree on the specifics, but the result was clearly the attitude. The old is bad, the new is good. We watched the new get implemented, and guess what happened? Religious vocations collapsed. Vocations to the priesthood went into free fall. People stopped making use of the sacraments. Fewer people going to confession, fewer people receiving the Eucharist, fewer people going to Mass. Depends on the number you look at. Some percentages say 13% go to Mass. Others say 17%. Doesn't really matter. Very few people go to Mass on a regular basis. And that is what we fight against. All the changes that came. Vatican II didn't say anything about whether people should get divorced or not. People say it did, and they invoke the Council, because the Council changed its orientation of the Church. Cardinal Roche and Cardinal Hollerich, Cardinal Gresh, three important figures at the Synod on Synodality. And they all said the traditional Mass was inappropriate for the new ecclesiology of the Church. That came from Vatican II. Ecclesiology is the theology of the Church and its relationship to the world, what its mission is in the world, and what its relationship to God is. Before Vatican II, you didn't have bishops and priests putting such a heavy emphasis on making a better world. Their emphasis was on the gospel. And all we hear from every single pope since the Council, including the current one, about going out there and making a better world. The better popes from the last few decades and the worst ones, all on the same page, to varying degrees. It is a man-centered orientation. The Council Fathers at Vatican II admitted that it was a man-centered orientation. That was the revolution with predictable consequences. That is what we fight against, is that revolution and its predictable consequences. Whatever a restoration of actual Catholicism looks like, everybody has their own guesses, or whatever the mechanism will be, I tend to think it won't be until we're on the other side of the material chastisement, as prophesied by Our Lady in numerous apparitions, as well as a lot of other mystics who had church-approved or tacitly approved prophecies. They all say the same thing. Whenever we get through that point, whoever's around after that will get to witness the glorious restoration. But until then, we fight. And the chief mechanism for fighting isn't just running your mouth, being mean online. It is tackling those sins that keep you separate from God, working on those sins of bad habits, growing in piety, getting to know the saints, picking up devotions, keeping a more Eucharistic life, more sacramental life, becoming a better Catholic. But that is what we fight for. All right. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It absolutely does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. And please pray for everybody we spoke about today. Not here to rile you up against anybody. Pray for them. First law of the church is the salvation of souls. Let us not lose sight of that. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.